Thanks everybody for coming on to this webinar. We had a lot of people on the first one. Roughly 65 people participated that were not panelists. So we had a lot of questions, and we decided to do a second webinar to get those questions answered that we could not get to, and plus any additional questions that anybody would have. So I want to thank Don again and Linda for coming on and agreeing to be our experts on this, because I certainly am not an expert on APEI. Again, I want to just reiterate what Gary said. If you're going to a forum, let your SIG leaders know and get some agendas. Get your thoughts on the agendas. That way everybody has a good, productive meeting. And with that, looks like Linda's got her screen up, so we'll kind of go ahead and get started. Linda, there were a couple questions that did not get answered the last time. And actually, this first question I think is going to be for Don, because they use max capture. And somebody asked how accurate max capture is. So Don, you kind of want to give your thoughts on max capture and how that works with APEI?
Yeah, I would say that the max capture within itself, the OCR, the optical character recognition software, works. It does everything that it's advertised to do. During the implementation, we did have to change an intensity, for lack of a better term, the intensity at which it was recognizing characters. The bigger issue for us was the data integrity. So not as much what was coming off the document, rather how it was set up in SX.enterprise. That became our biggest problem, which really we already knew that we had issues with vendor product numbers. So the max capture piece works. It does what it's supposed to do as far as the character recognition and the processing and that sort of thing. And the bigger problem that we had was really the data integrity.
So you highly recommend max capture then? You think it's been a pretty good product for you guys, and you've gained a lot of efficiencies because of it?
Yeah, I do recommend max capture for a lot of reasons. First of all, it eliminates, or it addresses the real barrier to doing electronic transactions with trading partners. Because you don't have to ask for forgiveness or beg anybody to trade documents, and everybody does EDI differently, it seems, and there's uniquenesses, and it just seems like that's a big gorilla. To simply ask a trading partner to send a PDF document to an email address, most people can understand what that means. So it's as simple as our vendors send their invoices to AP@Choctaw-Kaul.com with simple Outlook rules and a plug-in. We pretty much use our Microsoft Outlook Exchange as a VAN, as a value-added network. Basically, it moves our documents around, and then within the max capture suite of products or suite of processes, we automatically batch process. They get fingerprinted. If there's an error, it automatically shows up. So when the verify operator logs in, it automatically takes you to that error document. Usually it's because of the quality of a document that something would error in most times. So it really does what it's supposed to do. But again, that blocking and tackling, or those setups, that part of the implementation, it was new to us, and it took us quite a while to figure things out, or to develop some workarounds for file management and things like that. But the biggest piece ended up being in our data integrity and learning APEI and really understanding what APEI, how it functions, what the standard functionality is, how to do error management at the SXE level, and that's really where really a lot of the work was during the implementation.
Great. Well, that sounds really good. Before I forget, again, because I've already forgotten once, if you do have a question that you'd like answered during this webinar, there should be a question box somewhere in your kind of control screen. So go ahead and submit those questions, and all four of us will see them, and one of us will do hopefully a good job of reading those questions out loud, and Linda and Don will certainly do a good job of answering them. So if you have questions, please submit them that way. So I think the last webinar, we kind of ended on the delete and reverse. Linda, did we get that explained well enough, do you think?
Yes, I think we covered that. I think the next question that we did not get to was a question, could we have both capitalized add-ons and expensed add-ons processed on the same invoice and PO? So for example, you could have freight, which you wish to capitalize, and then you could have some other fee or charge from the vendor that you want to expense. And the answer to that is yes, you definitely can have a mixture of capitalized add-ons and expensed add-ons on the same PO. When you're in the PO, you need to pay attention to the box that says I want to capitalize this or I want to expense it. And the same is true in APEI. When you're in APEI, and I have a window here just to show us a play company of APEI that I opened up, you can, when you're in the when you're in the add-ons window, you have to pay attention. It's kind of a small little checkbox that says capitalized, or you uncheck it to be an expense. So each separate add-on that you enter could be a different type. Now, you cannot have two number one freight, one capitalized, one expense. You can only have one of each add-on number, but you could have freight capitalized and some other expense type of expense be expensed. And I believe that's true in all the versions. I don't think that's new in any way.
Are you limited on the number of add-ons you can have? We kind of ran into that issue here at 3E where we had a freight in and freight out, but then we also have kind of some small order charges. And then we have like some, what the vendor considers an allowance. And we were using our freight in and freight out in APSV. You know, like, are we just limited to two there?
Well, I believe there's a limit on the PO to how many total add-ons you could be allowed to have. Oh, I have something wrong with my system here. I think that there is a limit on the PO screen of how many POs, how many add-ons you can put on one PO. I believe the number is 8 is how many you're allowed to have. On this screen in the add-on, on the AP side of things, I don't believe there's any limit. But you, like I said, you cannot have the same add-on code more than once. So if the vendor charged you 2 different kinds of freight, you would have to have 2 different freight add-ons set up in SCSTT to itemize them. You can't pick freight number 1 and put it in as 2 entries. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, great. I believe one of the other questions that we didn't get to the last time was, is a standard option available to leave invoices that don't pass variances in the batch but not post them to AP?
Right, and that is sort of a confusing question, so I think we have to take a step back and explain a little bit of the functioning of APEI. So APEI really goes through 2 updates per invoice. So if I go back here to the main screen, you'll see here is the stage of an order, the stage of an invoice in APEI, and there's entered, updated, and then there's also closed. You don't normally see closed because most of us have the AO option set up to say to delete the APEI transaction records when they're closed, because you don't want them clogging up API. It can actually make the screens behave sluggish and not move well for the user. The entered stage means that I've typed this into APEI, either I manually typed it in or it came through EDI, and nothing has posted yet. So I could delete this, I could change anything about it, I could do whatever I want with it. Nothing has changed in the system in accounts payable or general ledger yet. When something goes to the updated stage, that's the first time you've run final update. At that point, it has gone into AP. It is now an invoice showing. If you were to go to APIT, you could see it there. But typically, depending on how you have AO set up, it would be on dispute. So you're not prepared to write a check and pay the vendor yet because you haven't finished the matching process and confirmed that you've received the goods in the warehouse, you've matched them up. So it automatically puts them into AP on dispute to say I'm not ready to pay this yet. And it posts the general ledger to AP and AP trade unmatched. So I wasn't quite clear on that question. At the time we do that first update, we have not got to the point yet of comparing variances and deciding if it's within variance or not in variance. So as far as the question that was asked, leave the invoices that don't pass variance in the batch but don't post them to AP, the answer is sort of that's not how it works. We post it to AP up front before, when we're in the updated stage, which is after we've posted it to AP, now is when I start comparing to the PO and doing the matching process and deciding if I'm in if my variance is within tolerance or not. So,
Kelly, I'd like to expand on what Linda said. That's all true. Part of our discovery, it was big because we didn't even use APEI at all. So we had a lot of things going on when we brought on Max Capture and EDI. And when we got into APEI, we did decide to post to AP on the front end and then manage any exceptions after the fact. What we found worked out better for our company was to set up the system so that it wouldn't post anything that was in error. So in the example that Linda has there, notice that it's in update stage, and to the right, the status message, there's an error. And if you did a right click, you'd see exactly why that didn't, why that didn't fully update. What we decided to do, in this you can do in standard, standard functionalities, you can choose not to update if it has any errors or not, so that everything would stay in an entered stage. And at that point, you can change the header, what's above. So, Linda, if you would, click on that second transaction. Notice that everything up top, including the amount, the invoice amount, and things like that. Well, we do business with over 1,200 vendors in a given year. And there are a lot of times that we do get billed wrong from the vendor. So what we decided to do internally is, instead of posting an invoice at a higher amount and then offsetting that with a credit or anything else, we just set that to what the price is supposed to be. So we will modify the vendor's invoice amount, and then we will put a note on that transaction, because you can do a right click and put a note on that invoice, and we will short pay that. That's how we short pay our invoices, because we're right, the vendor was wrong, and we're just going to immediately take that here. That's what we decided to do. Well, we also combined that with our ACH payments to the vendor and our remittance back to them. And we just take that comment or that note that we created here, the reason why we short paid, and we include that in the remittance back to the vendor. We have found that it works better in our environment because of our sheer volume to manage them that way. So what you do, how you do that, is when you go into your update, your APEGU, then you can set that so that it won't update if it has any errors. So in essence, it'll stay in APEI in entered stage, and it won't post. So even if we tried to do an update, if there was an error, then it still wouldn't post. So there is a way to do that. There is a way to not post to AP and wait until it all reconciles and balances, and then it would automatically update the next time I go to update.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I think that kind of the last question maybe from the last webinar is, what's the difference or best method to use for APEI? Is it the backorder option or the line item option?
I can take that question. That refers to this choice right over here at the end of the line. The choices are line, backorder, or item. And what those choices are about is it has to do with how the line item detail is being matched up with the lines on the PO compared to the lines on the invoice. And the method, it actually defaults the method. So if you are doing if you're manually entering something into APEI, like something that came in the mail, it defaults to the line method. If you bring something in through EDI, it automatically defaults to the item method. And the reason for that is because the EDI doesn't typically have line numbers in the data. So those have been determined by Infor to be the best possible way to match up with the data that you're working with. And then the idea behind it being a choice here is that you could, on a case-by-case basis, change that if you needed to. So for example, if you're entering things in and you know that this particular product on these POs is sometimes received across multiple suffixes. Maybe it doesn't all come in one shipment. It comes in multiple shipments that get received on different suffixes, but you've got one invoice for the grand total amount. Then you would know that putting it in through the line item method means you're going to have to pick the -00 and the line and then go to the -01, add that, and add the next one. So if you change that to the back order method, you could just put in the PO number and the line number and the full quantity, and the back order method would go and find the various suffixes that the quantity has been received on. So I don't know that you necessarily have to change that every item you put in. It's really more meant to be a concept where if the default method that was used when that invoice came in doesn't successfully match up, then you might consider changing the method on the fly to see if you get a method that matches quickly without having to do a lot of other research.
Okay, great. Thanks, Linda. So I had Patrick Metzinger. He submitted a question in between the last webinar and this webinar, and he's asking, will the variance work on the add-ons if the freight is on the same invoice as the product?
The variance would affect from the standpoint of the total invoice amount. So if I look in the final update window, I can see that I've got a quantity tolerance, a line tolerance, and an invoice amount. The add-ons would be part of the invoice amount tolerance. But for the most part, add-ons, you select your add-ons in the add-on window and they adjust these totals at the bottom. So the system isn't really doing a variance to say you expected an add-on of this amount and now you're billing this amount unless it's a capitalized add-on. Expensed add-ons are not. There isn't a variance in a comparison of what you expected versus what you're paying.
Okay, great. That makes sense. So Don, Susan Murley, she's asking, can Max Capture detect and read an attachment in an email in a specific folder?
So say again, what, could you rephrase or repeat that question, Kelly?
Sure, yeah. Can Max Capture detect and read an attachment in an email in a specific folder? So if your vendor sends you invoices through email and you automatically archive those in a specific folder, can Max Capture pick that up?
Max Capture can set it up. So you configure basically what I would call an input file. So where am I going to put the documents that I'm going to process? And then we just use Microsoft Outlook to manage the documents prior to that point. So in other words, we have everything generically going to AP@Choctaw-Kaul.com. Not every one of those vendors' invoices, well, first of all, not every one of those emails has an invoice. Not every vendor's invoice we have set up in Max Capture. So we set up rules based on the trading partner. Usually it's the sending email address. And then we will automatically move that, but we're using Microsoft or an add-in. There's a really nice add-in called Easy Detach. And so we'll use the Easy Detach feature. It's an add-in for Outlook, and it will validate that it's the right vendor, that it's a qualifying vendor for Max Capture, and then it will move that over to the public folder. And then from there, there's a process within Max Capture. It's called Quattro. And Quattro then will it will reformat the PDF to a TIFF, and then it will put that in a batch of 20, and then it will move on from a workflow. It'll move on to automatically then fingerprint and error checking and that sort of thing. So, so within itself, Max Capture does not manage your emails. It's just taking the end file result from that email process and then automatically processing that in batch.
Great. I'm not sure who can answer this question. Christine Platt is asking, if you're using EDI and are on a lower version than 10, do you need to receive the PO manually?
I can answer that question. The answer is no, you don't have to do it PO by PO, line by line. What we do is we figured out a way, and I'm happy to share the Q&D with you. What we do is we build the AP batch through EDI or Max Capture, and then we've decided for every drop ship, we build in the background, we automatically build the advanced shipping notice record. And then we use standard SX batch receiving to do that. So in POEI, you're able to do more than one PO receipt at a time. So by definition, on a drop ship, we don't question whether the customer received what the vendor invoiced because we're not in the middle. It's not like it came into our stock. So we've always traditionally accepted what the vendor has on their invoice, and that's what we've always received. So what we figured out was instead of mapping an 810 as an 856 advanced shipping notice and using that additional processing in SX.enterprise, we decided to simply build the APEI tables, and we have all the details, and then we just automatically wrote to those standard SX records, and then that allows then the system to automatically receive in all of those dropship POs, and we do it once a day for each warehouse. So we open up one POEI receiving journal per day per warehouse for all of our drop ships. And that alone was a huge time savings on our AP department because that saved a ton of processing time.
Let me go back to standard for just a minute and give a different answer. I mean, that's definitely one route to go. Don, that's a solution that Don's worked out. For those of you who may not know what this question was in reference to from Christine, there is a new functionality that was rolled out that now has the ability to say, I want you to automatically receive my direct PO when I'm bringing in the inbound invoice from EDI. So that's a new feature that's coming out in 10. So you would be able to use that once you've upgraded. There are some people that have purchased that as a modification on earlier versions, so if you really wanted to have it immediately, that would be a route you could look into, is purchasing that as a modification. Also, what Don's describing is another option that we do have some customers that have done, is you could take if you say to yourself, okay, the information that's on the 810 inbound invoice I'm receiving through EDI is telling me the correct quantities that need to get received on this direct PO. You could use your own mapping software to take that 810 document you've received from the vendor and create a map that makes that become an ASN, an Advanced Ship Notice 856. Then you could use the standard PO batch import process. If you read the EDI manual for SXE, there is an import that brings in ASN documents and creates a batch PO receiving like Don described, and then there's a function in APEI where you can call up the batch receiving that you've created from those ASNs and just click a button and receive all those directs at once. So that can be done just with mapping if you were, so you'd basically take the document you got from the vendor and you would have it go through two maps and create two different inbound documents for SXE. The 810 to go into the APEI process and APEGE, and you'd also separately create an ASN, an 856, that goes in through the PO process into PO batch. So you could create your own process that would do that. And then in the future, once you've upgraded, you would be able to use the standard feature where you don't even have to have that. It just uses the 810 information to do the auto receiving of the direct PO.
So Linda, I have a question then. We do that with our direct ships, but we also, in our AP people, they also create the sales order. Do you think the sales order could be created kind of in that same method?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by create. The sales order had to have already been created in order to have started this whole order. Are you saying that they're shipping the order? They're not creating the order.
Well, yeah. So our salesmen, they enter one line, like a lot price line, and then our AP people, they go in and then add the detail. So they add each individual product. And so, I mean, we do it on both the PO and on the sales order. And if we could add the individual products onto the sales order.
That would have to probably be something customized. The standard new function that came out that says auto receive my direct PO doesn't have any feature to do that I know of today.
Okay.
So Kelly, if I understand you right, you're opening up a sales order and you're opening up a tied dropship PO, and
Correct.
you don't have any line items on the sales order or the PO? Or
No,
you
it
don't
has
have
a
both
line
lines
item. They're changing the line items. They're reducing quantities in dollars and adding new lines with different dollars and quantities.
Yeah. There are ways to do that, but like Linda said, that is not standard. And I do know, if you don't mind, Linda, I do know that Linda provides those sort of services to take your business model, your business reason, and put together a good comprehensive solution for it, but that would be custom.
Okay, thank you. So Mike Chiappetto, he's asking, how do you set APEGU to not post if there are errors? Which option is it?
I think that's in reference to what, Don, what you were describing earlier.
Yeah, if you can pull up APEGE, Linda, on your screen. Or I'm sorry, APEGU. I'm sorry, APEGU. EIL. So you have options here to override. It's the same question. So number 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. You can choose to either do update or not update. So you can do just error checking. But if you have your tolerances set very slim on your APSV, and you set this to not override those tolerances, then it won't update.
Well, it will move it to the updated stage and put it into AP and the general ledger. It will not complete it to the close stage and finish the PO costing.
In this is where I'll interject with what we found, and in order for us to have our solution, then I have a piece that will actually move that entire group of errored transactions over to a different group name. And so that's how we worked around that issue. So in other words, I've got a group, for lack of a better term, that's called 810, because that's the EDI equivalent of an incoming invoice. And then I created a group name called 810 BAD, B-A-D. And so then what I do in between the APEGU non-update mode is then I'll run a piece of custom code that I have that just simply validates that there's an error, and it moves it over to the other job. And then when I schedule my APEGU in update mode, then I've already validated that it's only good transactions that will update.
Okay, great, thank you. Marta Rivera, she's asking, what option at APEGU do we have to set not to update anything with the error? I guess it's kind of the same question. I have invoices with error 20 that are updated.
Right, so what Don's basically saying is he runs it first in non-update mode, and then he takes all the ones that say 20 and moves them to a different group, and so then all the ones he has in his group are ones that did not indicate they would experience a problem, and those ones he ran APEGU again with update mode set to yes. So it's a little bit more complicated than just running it once. But there's, I mean, the initial design of APEI was to go ahead and let it go to the updated stage and then have you finish the matching process and deal with the reconciliation errors from an updated status. The only drawback to that approach, which Don mentioned as an example earlier, is if you've decided that the vendor has billed you incorrectly and the invoice total should be something lower, the way that you resolve that when it has already gone to the updated stage is you would put your differences to the variance account, and then you would turn around and enter a credit memo or a miscellaneous credit for the same invoice number for the amount you're supposed to be reducing and put it to, offset it to the same variance GL. Then when the check gets run, you've got the invoice for the original amount they sent you plus the credit memo for the reduction and what you feel was incorrect and the amount you really wanted to pay. So that is the API designed way of handling that situation.
Great. So Linda, I think we forgot to talk about this at the beginning, but your services certainly are available for hire.
Yes.
Going through right now and trying to implement APEI, or just they maybe have specific questions for their AP group, or like a specific process they have. I guess they can reach out to you, and you can certainly help them out. Is that correct?
That's correct. They can reach out to me, and we would put together a service work order for some billable consulting time by the hour, and then I would assist them. And then similarly, if you decided that there was something you wanted to have a custom program, such as the things that Don has suggested, if you wanted to customize something to work in a different manner from the standard, then I could also help you coordinate with your account manager that handles your customizations to design the details of what you want the program to do.
Great. Anybody who has not used Linda and are kind of contemplating it, Linda, she's a lifesaver. She does a lot of work for us, and I know she does a lot of work for a lot of customers. But Linda, you do a great job, and I know all of us that work with you appreciate all of the help you give us. So you come highly recommended.
Thank you.
And the workarounds that I have for that batch AP receiving, it was Linda who helped me. She's the one that helped me understand what the standard design was and really helped me get the nuts and bolts to automatically do those, flag them as advanced shipping notice without having to go through the formality of mapping. So, another plug to Linda to help me develop to the point that we do the things on our side.
Great. Well, I don't see any other questions right now. I know we've still got about 25 minutes left. If we don't have any other questions in the next minute or so, we can kind of consider this webinar through. Linda or Don, do you guys have any kind of final words of wisdom before we close it out?
No, the only thing that I want to plug is how we started the webinar the first time on the first version. And that is, if you haven't yet considered using APEI exclusively versus APET, there's really no reason not to do that. There's so many reasons to consider doing the batch and the batch methods because it's so powerful. It's so powerful to immediately enter your AP invoices however you get them. And then be able to manage those exceptions, within the module. APEI was designed with a whole lot of really good meat and potatoes, and it really is a meal within itself of being able to maximize AP through batch. And you don't have to do EDI, and you don't have to do max capture before you get started. So I would encourage anybody that's on the call who's not actively using APEI, I would encourage you to consider it because I truly, we've realized in a big way a big cost savings in effort, and we've been able to channel those skilled positions in different places of the company, and we're all better for it. So kudos to Infor for coming out with the APEI module and making it as flexible as it is.
Linda,
I think one of the
go
go ahead. I read Mike's question. Mike asked, would we support adding into the standard functionality a don't update if error option if they were to submit this as a request? Yes, Mike, I would agree with that as suggestion as a new enhancement. I think that would be a useful tool to have. So I think you could definitely submit that as an Infor Extreme issue incident and see what kind of traction you can build on it. I was just logging into a newer version of the system while Don was talking to try to answer Julie's question. Julie asked, how do you add freight to the customer invoice if we automatically receive the direct PO? So very good question, Julie. And there is a new feature that was added to version 10, which takes the PO that you put on during PO receiving and will automatically carry it over to the OE side. And I was just going to show you a couple of the choices and how that works. here in SASTT where I configure my PO add-ins, there's a new field here that was added that says what is the order entry add-on to be used. So you can select what order entry add-on should I set up on the customer direct order when I choose to use this pass-through feature. And then there's also a couple other flags to it. There's a flag on the customer that says, does this customer not allow these pass-throughs? So, you know, there are some exceptions or overrides to how it works. But for the most part, when you're in receiving of the PO and you're receiving a direct, it will carry it over to the order side.
That's an awesome feature.
Yes, that's a new feature that came out also in version 10. And most of these things that we're describing, I just want to mention that if you go into SX.enterprise, you know, these things that are, I know you guys might not be prepared yet for version 10, but it is out, it is a released version, it is available, and you could go in and take a look at these topics that I'm mentioning. They are explained if you were to come here and look at, there's a version 10, and actually just last month version 10.1 came out. So there are project review documents that talk about these various things we're describing, so you could read the details of how they work.
And then just like the automatic PO receiving feature that's available in 10X, we do that process of automatically moving that PO add-on over to the sales order. We have figured that out, and that's also part of our process that we do. So that's something that I'm more than happy to share any of that code or any of the, you know, the specs or any of those sort of things. I'm more than happy to make that available to Linda, you know, however you guys want. But some of these features, they're great features. And I know that we've been asking as licensees of the Infor Trend product forever. But, you know, this is true. Andy Berry was true to his word in that they're building a lot more standard features. You know, people that do mods or workarounds or whatever, they are building more of these features. And both that automatic dropship PO receiving and the synchronization of add-ons, those are two perfect examples. So again, some of these features you don't have to wait for if somebody is already doing it. However, I do feel comfortable, you know, when we go to 10X that we're going to be able to eliminate a lot of the workarounds that we have.
Great. Well, thanks, guys. So for all the attendees out there, I will be posting a link to this webinar. We are recording it, so I'll post the link to the webinar in both the Finance SIG group and the General SXE group. If you have any specific questions for any of us, please email. I know, Don, there were a couple people that wanted to know about the Easy Ask Outlook add-on. So please, Don, I assume they can email you about that, and you're more than happy to answer their questions.
Yep, and I can post on the user group website, too, some of the documentation or information about some of those add-ins.
Great. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming on. I don't have any more questions. If you feel that there's a lot of value to these types of webinars, please, you know, let myself or Gary Brown or Don Green know, and we'll try and coordinate more webinars of this type. We're trying to kind of build a little online catalog, education catalog, and this is what TUG is all about. We're here for the members. So if you have any ideas and would like to see more stuff like that, please let us know. We'll be happy to coordinate. Gary, do you have any final thoughts?
I do not. Just thank you all for attending, and for Don, Kelly, and Linda, thanks so much for putting on another great webinar.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we can bid everybody have a good day.
Thank you. It's always good to end early.
Thank you.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.